All right, Acts chapter 10. We're still dealing with Peter. Remember Peter last time he went down to Joppa. While he was there, he healed somebody. He brought her back to life, the little young lady Tabitha in Joppa. Well, he's still in Joppa tonight, and we're going to see the angel of the Lord appear unto him. But first, he's going to appear to the centurion Cornelius. So let's just start in chapter 10, verse 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian Band. So in the Roman army, they're broken up in bands, and the band would have between 5,000 and 6,000 soldiers. And then they would break it down even further. You would have a centurion, which over 100 people, centurion. So that's what this guy is. He's a centurion, and it tells you what band he's in. He's in the Italian Band, which all part of the Roman army. Verse 2, we get a little bit of a description about him. I want you to see the 4 things. He's a devout man, and he's one that feared God with all of his house, which gave much alms to the people, and he prayed to God always. So here is a guy, Roman, a Gentile, and he is doing the things that the Jews are supposed to be doing. Now you remember in Jerusalem, that's where Saul was. He's killing Christians, and now everybody's scattered except for the apostles, but we see Peter in Joppa. And they should have been doing this. They should have been praying always. The devout, praying, giving alms, which was an Old Testament law, and praying. So those 4 things. The Jews weren't doing the things that this guy is doing, because the Jews didn't want to have anything to do with Jesus. Of course, they're going through their rituals. All right, verse 3. He, that's the centurion, saw in a vision, evidently it's about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. What's important about the 9th hour? I don't think that's by accident. The 9th hour is when the Jews pray. Let me just show you. Go back to chapter 3, verse 1. Chapter 3, verse 1. Now Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, being the 9th hour. So anyway, it's an hour of prayer. So that's why he would have been, I think that's why the verse right before that prefaced to let us know, not only is he a devout man, but he prays to God always. So the 9th hour, he would have been praying. I put in your notes, and I messed up, and I meant to go back and change it, and I just now realized I never went back and changed it. I put in your notes that he was a proselyte, but he is not a proselyte. He's just a Jew, but he's devout to God. And that's a big deal, because a lot of the Romans had pagan gods that they would pray to, that they would worship, not this guy. Why would this angel of the Lord said live stream failed. Hold on one second. Live stream's not working. Why would an angel of the Lord come to him at the ninth hour? I think it's because that's when he was praying. That's what it appears to be. So let's go to Acts chapter 10, verse 4. And when he looked on him, he was afraid. Wouldn't you be afraid if an angel just showed up? Especially if you're in the middle of your prayers and here comes an angel of the Lord. He just shows up. He said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. In other words, God hears your prayers. He knows what you're doing. What's an alms giving? Alms giving, he could have been given, it was a Jewish law to give alms to the priest, the temple, but mainly to the poor. So he probably is given to the people, given to the poor. He's given of the money that he makes. And it says that his prayers and his alms are come up for a memorial before God. Verse 5. And now, this is what the angel's telling to Cornelius. Send men to Joppa, call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. So this angel of the Lord is telling him, call for Simon. You remember where Simon is? He's in Joppa. And you remember who he's staying with? We looked at it last week. You probably don't remember. He's staying with Simon, a tanner, which would have been the lowest job you could have just about. I think that whoever washes feet would be the lowest. A shepherd is low. This tanner, he would have been real low because handling dead animals. So he's always got to be rebaptized, ceremonially cleaned, go to the temple, get cleansed again. He's going to constantly have to be getting cleansed. It was a very low profession. It stinks. Probably why he's by the Mediterranean Sea. Let that wind just carry the stench out to sea. So that's probably why he's there. And I had a question that I'm asking myself. Why Peter? We know he's in Joppa, but why would God call Peter to come to this centurion that's a Roman? And let me show you why I ask that question. Go back to chapter 8, verse 40. Chapter 8, verse 40. I'm going to show you two places. But Philip was found at Azotus, and passing through, he preached in all the cities till he came to Caesarea. Now, you remember Philip, he's an evangelist. He's already gone to a couple places that Peter went. And everywhere he went, remember the Ethiopian eunuch, people are getting saved because he's preaching. All right, let's go to Acts chapter 21, verse 8. Acts 21, verse 8. And the next day, we that were of Paul's company departed, came to Caesarea, and we entered into the house of Philip the evangelist, which was one of the 7, and abode with him. Now, when it says he's one of the 7, you remember in Acts chapter 6 that they were Grecian women that weren't being treated fairly because they're not getting the daily portion of what they were supposed to be getting. So, Peter says, we're not going to give up praying and studying the Word. Call yourselves 7 men full of the Holy Ghost, of good report. And Stephen was one of them, but so was Philip. He's still living in Caesarea. Where is the Roman centurion? Caesarea. Why would God not ask Philip to go there and talk to him instead of going to get Peter, making him make the 30-mile journey to go to where this centurion is? The Bible doesn't tell us, but I have my suspicion, and we're really going to see it when we get to chapter 15. Let's keep going, and it'll unfold, and I'll tell you why I think that God has chosen Peter, the spokesperson, the leader of all the apostles. Verse 6, he lodged with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. So this is the angel still telling Cornelius to go to Simon, and now he's telling him where he is. He lodges with Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. And look at what he's going to do. Peter's going to do this. He's going to tell thee what thou oughtest to do. Here's the problem. When Peter gets there, he doesn't have a clue what to tell him. I mean, look down at verse 29, and let me just show you. We'll get there eventually, but therefore came I unto you without gainsaying. In other words, he didn't hesitate. As soon as I was sent for, I asked, therefore, what intent have you sent for me? Why'd you send for me? It says the same thing back up at 21. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him for Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause wherefore you are come? He's asking them, why am I here? The angel of the Lord sent him there. He's supposed to know what he's supposed to say. So we see back up at verse 6, the angel is telling Cornelius, the Roman centurion, that Peter's going to tell you what you should do. Let me take a break real quick and just go through some things real fast that I think we need to know. You remember all the way back in Genesis 12, God called Abram, and said, get you up out of your country, go to a land I will show you. I'm going to make you a great nation. Your seed is going to be like the stars of heaven. So he's telling Abraham, there's going to be a nation come from you. He's chosen Abraham to start the nation of Israel. So you remember how it went. So you had Abraham, then he had Isaac, and then he had Jacob, and Jacob had Joseph, and Joseph went off. He was sold into slavery, and he's in Egypt. And while he was in Egypt, he was under the Pharaoh. But then 400 years later, God sent a deliverer named Moses. Moses is going to lead God's chosen nation that's formed now. It's the Hebrew people, the Israel nation, and he's going to lead them out of Egypt. When he leads them out of Egypt, they go to the wilderness. When they go to the wilderness, God gives them three things that they really need to do, besides the worship and the temple and the tabernacle and all that. And here it is. 3 laws. You have the ceremonial law, dietary law, and moral law. 3 things. Why did he give the Jews, that Israel nation, the Hebrew people, why did he give them those 3 things? Dietary, ceremonial, and the moral law. Because he wanted them to be a separated people group from all the other people. You're not to be anything like them. So he gave them a law for what they can eat, dietary law. And you can read and see that they can't have anything with the hooves. You can't have catfish because it doesn't have scales. You can't have shrimp, so you can't have pigs. And so he said, this is clean, this is unclean. And it's not just for health benefits. It was to separate them from the rest of the world. That's just key to know as we start going forward here. And you see verse 7 again in Acts chapter 10. When the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continuously. All right, one more thing I meant to say when I was telling you about the Jewish nation. Back in Genesis 12, God told Abram, those that bless you, I will bless. Those that curse you, I will curse. That went not just to Abraham, but then it went to Isaac and Jacob and now to Israel. So if you bless Israel, the Jews, you'll be blessed. If you curse them, you'll be cursed. That's why this centurion is blessing Israel. He knows if he blesses Israel, he'll be blessed and not cursed. Let me show you another example that's exactly like this guy. Look at Luke 7. Look at Luke 7. Verse 1. Now when he had ended all of his sayings in the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum. This is Jesus. Capernaum is next to the Sea of Galilee. It is his home base. So where Jesus' home base is set up now. A certain centurion's servant, which was dear unto him, was sick and ready to die. And when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy. All right, here you go. You've got another centurion. And the disciples are saying in verse 4 that this centurion, he's a Roman, he's a Gentile, but they're saying he's worthy. What makes him worthy? He worships God. He worships God. He gives his alms. He's a devout man. And let me show you what else he does. Let's keep reading. He is worthy for whom he should do this. This is why. Look at verse 5. He loveth our nation, and he hath built us a synagogue. I think it's pretty neat. I'm sitting here reading this out of this Bible in the synagogue that this guy built. It's still there today. Isn't that neat? So verse 6, then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy. Now just a minute ago, the disciple said he's worthy. Look at what he says. I'm not worthy. Do you know that's how we ought to be? God, I'm not worthy. That's how we should be. But look at what he says. I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. Wherefore, neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee. See, he didn't come. He sent somebody to Jesus. He didn't think he was worthy even to go to Jesus. But say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I also am a man set under authority. Now I want you to think about Acts chapter 10. That guy's under authority. I mean, he's in authority. Having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, go, and he goeth. To another, come, and he cometh. And to my servant, do this, and he doth it. Why am I reading this? A couple things to let you know that if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. Also, that Roman centurion in Acts is doing this. He's telling them, go to Joppa, go get Peter, bring him back. He's doing what this guy's saying. Verse 9 of Luke chapter 7. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned him about. He turned about to see and said unto the people that followed him, that's all the Jews. Look at what he tells them. I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. That's why Israel fell. That's the book of Acts. He can't find faith in Israel. So what is he doing? Go back to Acts 10. What's he doing? Now he's going outside of Israel. He's going outside of Jerusalem. Now he's going outside of Israel because he can't find faith in Israel. So let's keep going. Look at Acts chapter 10, verse 8. And when he had declared all these things unto them, This is a centurion declaring to those guys. Remember, if I tell this one to go, he goes. And if I tell him to come, he comes. Okay, he's declaring it to them so they'll go. And look at verse 8 again. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. Verse 9. On the morrow, so in other words, the next day, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city. So they're getting close to the city of Joppa. You remember Joppa? That's where Peter was preaching. The man fell out of the window. That's Joppa. I've been there too. It's pretty neat. It's where Jonah ran away to. So on the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh to the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. So now it's noontime. Verse 10. And became very hungry, because it's noontime, and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. Now, part of the houses over there, the rooftop is part of their house that they take advantage of. Some for the heat, to get out of the heat and get the air breeze, especially off of the sea. But it's just a normal place where people would go and sit, sleep, relax. And that's what he's doing here. And people downstairs, apparently, according to that verse, are cooking, making the food. So while they're cooking and he's hungry, he's just going to go upstairs, up on top of the roof. Verse 11. And saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending upon him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth. So it's probably like a blanket or curtain or cloth coming down. Verse 12. Wherein were all manners of four-footed beasts of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and fowl of the air. And there came a voice to him, mine's in red, so it's Jesus. Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord. We've heard Peter say that before. For I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. So what has just taken place? And that's why I wanted to mention earlier about the dietary law. It's against the law for them to eat or take of anything that's that's unclean. And here comes all of these animals that the Old Testament declares to be unclean. Peter saying, not so. When else did he say, not so, Lord? Remember whenever Jesus in Matthew 16, I'm going to die, I'm going to rise again the third day. Not so, Lord, may it never be. Get behind me, Satan. This isn't the first time. And I ask you another question in your notes. If he is Lord, would you tell him no? I'm just asking. Because if you tell him no, then he's not Lord. Or he is. But anyway. Verse 15. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. So it's common to him, it's unclean to him. Verse 16. This was done thrice. How many times? 3 times. Peter's so hard-headed and hard to get to that Jesus has to tell him 3 times. Is that the first time he had to tell him 3 times? No. Peter, do you love me? You know I love you. Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know I love you. Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Peter, before the cock crows the 3rd time, you're going to deny me 3 times. Before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. I don't know why. I'm just thinking of Israel right now. So we're walking and we're where Jesus would have told Peter that. So we open our Bibles and we start reading about the time that the cock's going to crow. And when he does, Peter has just denied him 3 times. And we're reading it in the Bible. And as soon as we got through, guess what happens? Rooster starts crowing. That's pretty cool. I didn't deny you, Lord. All right, Acts chapter 10. And now let's read verse 16 again. This was done thrice or 3 times, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. So it left him. Verse 17. Now while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean. So that word doubted, it just means he was sitting there contemplating, wondering what just happened. What happened? What did I just see? Behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate. So they're at the city gate, and they're asking, where can I find Simon the tanner and Simon Peter? Verse 18. And called and asked whether Simon, which name was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. So here comes the vision again and the Spirit again. Arise, therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, because the Bible just said he was doubting. Doubt nothing, for I have sent them. So the same angel, and that's another thing. Why did the angel go to Cornelius first and not Peter? Peter's supposed to be the apostle, and this is going to be the first Gentile that's saved. Why is the Holy Spirit or Jesus going to Cornelius and then Peter? Verse 21. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius and said, Behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore you are come? They said, Cornelius the centurion. He is a just man, and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews. He was warned from God by a holy angel to send for you, Peter, into his house. In other words, into the centurion's house, and to hear words of thee. He wants to hear you, what you got to say to him. Verse 23. Then called he them in and lodged them. I want you to remember that. He took them in and he lodged them. They had to do that. That was customary, but it was also law. You have a stranger come into your area, you had to put them under your roof and care for them. That's why it was a big deal during Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis. And these angels come up and they take him into the house. And here's, take my daughters, but you can't have these men. They had to protect those men. So they would take him in, and they lodged at his house. So verse 23 again. Then called he them in and lodged them, and on the morrow Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. So he's got some people that he has gotten to go with him, Jews, to travel with him. Now I was just wondering, is it bodyguards? Is it witnesses? I think it's witnesses. He's going to need these witnesses, not next week, but the next week when we get to chapter 11. He's going to need them. Because Peter is going to Gentile country. He's going to come back to Jerusalem and say, I went to a Gentile country. What? You're out of here. Hold on, wait. Because it's against the law. That's why it's such a big deal, that the angel says, don't doubt, just do it. Let me tell you how one commentator was talking about the Jews and the Gentiles. See, the Jews were God's chosen people. They were the spokespeople for the world, for God. All the oracles came through, and the laws, they came through the Jews for the world. You want to be blessed, you come through the Jews. God speaks to the Jews. God dwells with the Jews, but for the other nations. So, the way the Jews, they started getting prideful, puffed up, and this is what they thought. The only thing the Gentiles are good for is fuel for the fires of hell. It's the only thing they're good for. Now, how would you feel if you were Peter and Jesus says, you go to a Gentile? That's what's happening. He's not so, Lord. So you see in verse 23 that he's got brethren from Joppa accompanying him. Verse 24. And the morrow, after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them, and he called together his kinsmen and his near friends. Let me just tell you what happens. As they get to the centurion's house, get close, he's calling for all of his relatives and his friends. Hey, I want y'all to hear this guy. This guy is the one that the angel of the Lord, he sent for him. I saw him in a vision. He told me by name who he is, and God's delivering him to my house. You've got to come hear this guy to see what he has to say, because the angel of the Lord said he's going to tell you what you need to do. We need to hear it. Can you just imagine as these guys? So it tells us in 24 that he's gotten his kinsmen and near friends together in his house. Verse 25. And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him, fell down at his feet, and worshipped him. Verse 26. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up! I myself also am a man. There are a few times in the Bible where somebody would fall down before a man or an angel. I put two of them in your verses in your notes. Remember John? He went up into heaven. He fell down before the angel. The angel says, Get up, get up. I am a servant, a fellow servant. Stand up. Every time they say stand up, stand up, stand up. There's only one person that's to be bowed down to and worshiped, and that's Jesus. Nobody else. Now here's Peter. I thought this was funny. Here's Peter saying stand up. Who does the Catholic Church think the first pope is? Peter. Who do they bow down to today? The Pope. I just thought that was funny. Peter saying, stand up, I'm just a normal man. Not putting down on the Catholic Church, I'm just saying today we will bow down and worship athletes, we will bow down and worship singers, we'll bow down and worship the Pope. And if you go into some of their churches, they have all of these statues up and they bow down and kiss their feet. Matter of fact, in the Vatican, they have a bronze statue of Peter, and it's in Rome. I don't know where I just said, but anyway, it's in Rome. Bronze statue of Peter. Do you know that his toes are missing off of one of his feet? Because so many people have kissed his feet. I'm not going to tell you what I heard. Here another commentator. He says, I guess they need to call a tow truck. I just thought it was funny. Oh, goodness. Yeah, but his toes are missing because they've kissed his feet, and they still do it to this day. You're not to bow down to Mary, to Peter, to Paul, any other man, just Jesus. That's why it's such a big deal, because there was one angel that does want you to bow down and worship him. And that's Satan. What does he say in Matthew 4 and in Luke 4? Jesus, if you bow down and worship me, I'll give you all of these kingdoms and the glory of them. He wants you to worship him. Why is it such a big deal that no other man, no other angel will allow you to bow down before him? Because it belongs to God. He doesn't share his glory with anybody, is what he says. Even in the commandments. The second one, you're not to bow down or worship them, for I, your Lord, am a jealous God. Anyway, let's move on. Verse 27. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together. Imagine Peter walking in the house. Whoa, I wasn't expecting all this. I just used my imagination, I guess. Look at all these people. Go to chapter 11. Look at verse 1. I don't even have to turn my page, but you might have to. Chapter 11, verse 1. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God. All right, now go back to verse 27. You see, there was many people that came together in Cornelius' house, and they all heard, the Gentiles heard the word of God. Verse 28. And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come in unto one of another nation. That's what I was telling you earlier. It was against the law for Peter to be there, against their law. That's what he means by unlawful thing for a man that's a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. Remember, I told you, a minute ago, to remember that when Peter lodged with them, and now he's saying, I can't even keep company with you. To me, I just find little things like that. It's just funny. He didn't have a problem earlier when he slept with them, in the same house with them. Now he says, I can't keep company with you or come into your nation. But then he tells them why he's there. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. When did he learn that God showed him he shouldn't call any man common or unclean? When did he learn that? Yesterday. Not at Pentecost, not when the Holy Spirit came down. He learned it yesterday when he saw that vision come down from heaven with the sheet with all of the unclean things. It's something new for him. He hasn't known this. God showed it to him yesterday in a vision. Verse 29. Therefore, let me just say this real quick. It shouldn't have... Well, let's keep going. Verse 29. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying, as soon as I was sent for you. I ask, therefore, for what intent ye have sent for me. He's asking the wrong people. They didn't send for him. The angel told him to go. He should have asked the angel. He should have asked Jesus. Because all these guys know. Look back at verse 6. He will tell you what you ought to do. Now he gets there where in verse 29, why'd you send for me? That's kind of confusing. Verse 30. Cornelius said, he's just going to tell him about the vision that he had. Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting unto this hour. And at the 9th hour, I prayed in my house. That's why I brought that up a minute ago. The 9th hour is an hour of prayer. What did he do before he started praying? He was fasting. So he was fasting first, then he started praying at the 9th hour, because that's when the Jews pray in the temple. He can't go to the temple. He is a Gentile. He can't sacrifice. He can't go to the temple. He can't go to the priest. He's a Gentile. But he can still do all of the things and keep the same covenants that they're keeping. He's trying to. So he's telling them, I was praying at the ninth hour, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing. Verse 31. And said, Cornelius, thy prayer is heard, thy alms are had in remembrance in the sight of God. Send therefore to Joppa, and call hither Simon, whose surname is Peter. He's lodged in the house of one Simon, a tanner, by the seaside, who when he cometh shall speak unto thee. Remember, 3 times. That's the 3rd time he said he's at Joppa. He's at Simon the tanner's house 3 times. I thought that was interesting. Verse 33. Immediately, therefore, I sent to thee, and thou hast well done that thou art come. Now, therefore, are we all here present before God to hear all things that are commanded thee of God. So we're here to hear all the things that God has commanded. We want to hear from you, Peter. All right, I'm going to stop and ask us a question. Plus, that's as far as I went on your notes. I didn't know how far I could get tonight without running out of time. So let me just ask us a question, then you can ask questions. In verse 33, it says, I sent for thee, and thou hast well done that thou art come. Peter did good. Let's use that word. My English teacher would be mad at me because you can't end in an adjective. But he did well by coming to the Cornelius' house. Who else did well? Cornelius did well. They both were obeying God. Now that's why they're all present before God to hear all things that are commanded thee of God. All right, think back to chapter 9 at the beginning of it. What about Paul, which was Saul? Was he doing well? Not at all. Persecuting Christians, killing them. Man, woman, child, binding them up, bringing them to Jerusalem so that he could put them on trial for blasphemy, saying that Jesus is God. Look at these guys. They're all doing well. I'm only bringing that out because Paul is a pattern of our salvation. Matter of fact, let me say this. The Gentiles were considered by the Jews their enemy. Who did God come to save? Of course, everybody. Enemy. Not just the Jews. Now, everybody can be saved. Remember Romans 5, was it verse 11? While we were enemies, God saved us. So next week, we'll get into the rest of chapter 10, which is the conversion of not only the centurion, but all of his house. They're going to be saved, and then they're going to be baptized, and then chapter 11, Peter's going to go back, and he has to confront the Jews because they're not going to be happy because these Gentiles got saved. He never tells them they have to be circumcised. You're going to see that at the beginning of chapter 15, where they come from Jerusalem all the way to Macedonia, and where Paul is preaching and telling them, hey, you can trust in Jesus, that's all right, but you got to be circumcised. You got to keep the law. And that's going to cause a problem. All right, so that's all I have tonight. Do you have any questions?